Okay, everyone. I'd like to bring the meeting to order. This is the Town of Concord Planning Board meeting for October 22nd, 2019. And we have our 7 o'clock item ready to start. But before we get going, I just want to mention that this meeting is being televised as usual, and that you can also make your own recording, as we are. But if you do, just let us know so that we can set you up without disrupting the meeting. This is the recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the application of Symes Development and Permitting, LLC, for a variance and special permit under sections, well, various sections of the zoning bylaw, and for a 36-unit planned residential development at 1440, 1450, and 146B Main Street. So we have had a number of meetings where we've discussed this project. I don't really know what we're about to see. We didn't get any package before the meeting that I'm aware of. So I guess I'll turn it over to the applicant. And we may need to reconvene over there in order to see what's going on. This probably is the right moment. Okay, and then we'll come back here when we get to the next phase of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Richard Harrington. I'm the engineer from Williams and Sparagus. With us today is Jeff Ruder, the representative for the applicant, attorney Brad Latham, Elise Stone, who is the architect, and Kim Ahern, who is also the landscape architect. We appreciate your time tonight. We have a PowerPoint presentation I'd like to go through, update you on the plan revisions we made, and you are correct, there's nothing on file yet. We have copies available. This is the original rendering that we talked about a few months ago. It shows that the streetscape has 3 homes, a park along Main Street, and also frontage along Highland Road. You'll see various colors with Main Street at the bottom and Highland Road on this side going in this direction, with the commuter rail in Center Village on this side. The different shades of the dwellings that you see represent different dwelling styles. They're all different shapes, sizes. Some are attached, some are detached. They're all single family. Some have 1-car garages and some have 2. We have explained that and come to agreement, and this plan has evolved, and along with various input from neighbors from Center Village, from the Marquis family, from Highland Road, and other neighbors throughout the local neighborhood and across town. As you know, this is a planned residential development application, but it's actually a planned residential neighborhood, just because of all the people I talked about in advance of this last statement. It's in harmony with and respectful to the abutting home sites. We've met at the dining room tables of many people and also in the church basement down the road. It's diverse in dwelling unit style and types, which Elise has presented in previous meetings, and those plans are on file with you. We also have included in this quick showing of the basement floor elevations, which you actually requested as well. It's connected to the abutting open space, which is the town land to the left of in the picture, or the west, and also to the abutting Junction Square open space. It is also socially connective to the local businesses and the public transportation. As you know, we can walk to the town center. It's vital to support that local area, and this cluster development will provide that as well. And it's also within that half-mile radius of the town train stop. The shape, dimension, character, and location of the common open space. This is talked in detail in your zoning bylaw, which is section 10 for this special permit. And it's to ensure a suitable use as a neighborhood park and conservation purposes by at least all the residents of the planned residential development. There's been great talk about, is every square footage of the open space suitable for the public? And the first criteria is that it's at least available to all the residents, which we believe it is. You'll see in more detail that we've gone a long distance, and the applicant has done significant efforts to allow the public to access all the walkways that are also outside the open space, and also our community green that you'll see at the bottom of the plan. Access to the tracks. Within the planner's report, you hear that statement. The board has to decide if there's suitable access to the track or the neighborhood park. You'll see that we have frontage along Main Street here. We have the access with the two sidewalks. We have 2 more sidewalk curb cuts here to the park. We have sidewalk access here where there's the old driveway to the existing homes. We believe that we do provide suitable access to this tract, which is a criteria for the planning board to review and give a recommendation to the Board of Appeals. You will notice that we turned off the other homes on this picture. The board has seen this before. As you're driving down Main Street, this is what you're going to see in immediately close proximity to the frontage. You'll notice the homes in each direction are also single family, and there's single family across the street. Another statement that's within the plan's report for you to discuss and provide a recommendation to is, does it maintain the visual quality of the area? This is subjective, and albeit a great discussion item. You will notice that there are about 5 houses on the opposite side of the street. We could also have 5 or 6 houses on our side of the street, but that plan has evolved, and we're asked to move the houses out back and develop this park area and have an L-shaped connection over to Highland Street, sorry about that, which we have done. We believe that with the extensive landscaping that Kim and her can speak about along the frontage, the Daniel Hayes Park, and the minimalization of driveways with 0 curb cuts for driveways and just 1 access driveway, we believe that we're maintaining the visual quality for this area of Main Street within this part of town as you head towards Maynard or you enter the district where it gets denser towards the shops. This is our interpretation of the houses that we believe you may see as you drive either from the center towards Maynard or into Maynard, from Maynard into Main Street, and not around through Prairie because you won't see any houses in that direction. The entrance, you'll see these homes down from the street. There's a berm along this area. There's a berm along this area also. And when you come down this road, it's lower in elevation in this direction and also in this direction than the level portion of this street along our entire frontage. You will recognize that this is less than half of the homes that we're proposing. And the ones that are further out in the back are just rooftops that are probably already blocked by vegetation that we're proposing, vegetation that we're maintaining, and also the proposed houses that maintain the visual quality along our tract of land, which is a requirement of the regulations. We listened to your comments from the last meeting, and thank you. What we did was we took these 2 portions of the sides of the park and made them a little bit wider. We also took the layout plan and adjusted and provided more open space at this location. That represents this green area is a little bit less, so it's darker green on each side here, and this location here is darker green as well. So this is the current layout plan that you'll be seeing that was updated. It also shows the exclusive use areas of each proposed dwelling. It is a condominium association like we spoke about at prior meetings. You will notice that the approval not required lot over here has a little more detail on it. That plan has been approved by the Board of Appeals. So we have received a special permit to construct that house, and that is currently undergoing the building permit process. So one of the primary objectives was to move the owner over to the side, regardless of which type of development, and that is in the works, and so step 1 is underway. This is the updated grading plan, and this is the PRD, or Planned Residential Development, the accessible route. And because this is not a subdivision and it's not a public road, a private driveway needs to comply with the handicap accessibility rules if you have a sidewalk right against it, which we do have. So we have a looping sidewalk around the entire sidewalk system and road network And from this point here, we basically go down in elevation 4.5%, so we lay out in the bottom. That is what drives this design. It also started with a request from the fire chief and various other safety officials was, can you loop the road? So we sat down with Elise and talked about the architecture, and she came up with this design based on some feedback that I gave her on the grading. What you will find is that because of the 5% requirement for the sidewalks, there is a little more grading or cut along here, along the fringe of the lot areas or the open space. And there's a cut along this side also. If this was a regular subdivision, we could go steeper, the sidewalk could be steeper, and we wouldn't have to comply with that requirement, and you'd see a different layout. So those cuts, if you will, along this side or along here, would still occur whether it was a conventional subdivision or this type of development as a cluster, which provides the open space, the neighborhood park, and all the other benefits that the town strives for. The updated utility plan, you'll see that it's a little difficult to see in the colors, but basically what we have is, this is the plan that will be sent back to GPI, your consultant, to check on all the drainage. And we've updated things in a little more detailed manner, the water, the sewer, the electric. The green in the middle is our septic system. The blue are the subsurface chambers. So basically we come in and to the left, we have subsurface and an overflow in this direction, which is required. And then we have other drainage and an overflow in this direction back to our site, which is also a requirement of your regulations. So we will submit all that information back and have your review consultant review our stormwater and provide a update on their analysis. That's the end of our portion of it overall. We do have more information, but what we also have is the other discussion items that we have is we'd like Kim Ahern to talk about the landscape architecture. Elise is here to talk about the basement plans in a general manner. Jeff Ruda has prepared a density comparison of surrounding area, which you'll find that the per square footage of the land area, each of our unit has more land per the abutting properties. And then we also talked about the trucking plan, which was a great concern of the neighbors. We sat down and met with the police department and Patriot Excavating, who's the anticipated contractor. And they went over the concerns of the police department. And that report's available also for you and we'll just present that in a general manner. We also have a construction plan, which is part of that trucking plan. Basically, at the entrance on the left and right will be all the vehicles. There'll be no vehicles parked out on Main Street. There'll be no vehicles on the abutting Highland Street. We will have a staging area within the property, and as that evolves with the phasing, we'll pave a little bit of the entrance to get off the road a little bit quicker, and you'll see that we'll control that site and protect the trees that we're going to protect in the park. So what I'd like to do is just have Kim come up and talk about the landscape plan in a general manner because she hasn't had a chance to talk about that yet. And this is the rendering that was already on file at your office, and you'll find that she can talk about it in general detail, and it's based on our design.
People can see me behind here. I'm Kim Ahern, I'm the landscape architect, and I think I've presented this once before at least, but just generally, when I first went to the site, one of the things that really struck me were all the American beech trees there and also the hemlocks. And so as we developed the plan for the landscape, we kind of took into consideration what was existing and what was really already beautiful and tried to use that as an element to spin the design from. So that, is this the little thing? So the park, right, I can't see, I'm sorry, I have got my eyes dilated today and they're not quite back. I really can't see. A little bit to the right. I'm sorry, I can't see. Anyway, the park right off of Main Street. Yeah, Rich, you do it. Right there. So that's where all the beech trees are. So we're really enhancing that. Rich and I went to the site, flagged the trees that were in bad shape, but and more importantly, flagged the ones that were in great shape. to be saved. And because of that, we pushed the units in a certain direction so that we could save those trees. Along the street, I've got a row of elm trees, and then behind those, there's quite a band of combination of rhododendron, viburnum, serviceberry, so that really there's a nice buffering and kind of a residential feel as you come down Main Street. The other important aspect for me as a landscape architect is thinking about linking green space. So when I saw the hill, which I call Hemlock Hill, but I don't think anybody else does, but that's okay. But there's sort of a hill that I wanted to connect from that kind of beech tree area right up above, and that gives you kind of a longer vista and a longer kind of nice meandering path and experiential looping around. And then the other nice open space was where, if Rich, you could go right in there. So that's a different character than the other two areas. That's more of an open space, a place you can go and picnic, throw a ball, where it's really open, more meadowy than the other two. Throughout the roadway system, the drive all through the development, I looked at where we could really place large shade trees. And so looking at red maples, oak trees, mostly trees you'd see in any of the neighborhoods in around Concord anyway. And then along with that, interspersing smaller trees like crab apples, flowering cherries. We even have some rain trees, things like that. And then we do show some shrubs, but that's on a much different level. So I've just given an indication of what the shrubs could be, but at each unit, eventually we would do a landscape plan around the houses. I think that's about it.
I'd like to ask Elise Stone to come up and just give a quick overview of the additional plans she has for the basement for each house style.
Hi, Elise Stone, architect. So these, last time I went through all the plans of the different houses, and so this is just the added basement plans. The houses are the 2 and 3 bedroom houses, and all of them will have full basements, especially the ones in the back. They're walkouts, so you kind of automatically, with the grade, get a full basement. The idea is that, you know, they will have a finished rec room down there, playroom, etc. But you know, fairly straightforward, limited windows, and I have shown a bathroom, and that'll be probably decided with each unit whether it's actually completed. But the idea is probably, as everyone, I do a lot of residential in Concord, and most people do end up finishing their basement. So I did the 4 different units.
Says a page down, but it's A2.
Yeah, so that one, the B units are walkouts in the back because those are the ones that kind of where it falls off down to the railroad tracks. So those will have a slider, but the grade on the side will just naturally go down. It's, you know, there won't be anything, you know, retaining walls and stuff necessarily put in. And those are the smaller C units, the duplexes. The square footage, they are on there. Do you have, can you see them? I think each one might have a finished square footage of 500 square feet, plus or minus the rooms. Each room is a little bit different. The hall, you know, basement is the same size as the first floor, but that all won't be finished.
So did the unit size calculations we saw before, they did not include finished basement?
No. The square footage is, I mean, with any job I do, any real estate will tell you they never include basements, just like they never include garages. And actually, for the way the town calculates square footage, when they're doing anything for a special permit, a basement is not included. Porches and basements are not included, so they weren't. But I did add the square footage on all of these. Okay.
Thank you, Elise. Jeff Root is going to talk about the density comparison.
Thank you. I just want to point something out on the finished basements. There's only 8 walkouts that are designed right now. We were asked to do the finished basements just to show what could be finished. Our experience is roughly a third of the walkout basements that we build get finished. So, page down, Rich?
Yes.
We did a density study based upon the last meeting where we started right here. I believe that's the library right there on the corner and the church right here. So the light green is everything that we studied. There's 64 properties that we took into account and 73 units. There's several of them that are duplexes. The next page I'm going to show you is goofed up, but the conclusion is correct. This is what happens when you transfer an Excel sheet to a PowerPoint. We'll get it updated on the planning board site tomorrow, but the conclusions are accurate. So the summary of the study area, there were 73 units, 64 addresses. Average square footage was 9,821 square feet. Our average square foot per unit is 10,811.
Does that include your interior drive?
It's the whole parcel, yes.
Yeah, so versus the other lots that just have driveways, right?
Yep.
They don't count the main street itself.
Right. But you wouldn't deduct the driveways on the houses on the summary area either. So, but we can deduct the roads if you want. I don't think it's going to make a significant difference. I mean, the next one I anticipated is deducting the wetland. The wetland's about 48,000 square feet. That drops our average square footage down to 9463. So no matter how many ways, and I was pretty fair about it, you know, and we'll get this posted, I'm sure there'll be, where's the page up? You know, you'll notice right here, I excluded this building. It's either a 3 or a 6 unit building owned by the Concord Housing Trust, and I didn't feel it appropriate to include in there because I felt it would have skewed the numbers down on our side. So I was pretty fair. There's a couple of more properties that aren't really, their address is not Main Street, but I included them.
Did your space also include the open area?
Excuse me?
Did your space also include the open area? Yeah, I'm sorry. So the planning board will go through the presentation, ask their questions, and then they'll open it up for public comment. I think the board, when they ask a question, actually needs to use the mic. I can yell.
Next, we met with town planner and the police department. We had Patriot Excavating, I don't know if you folks are familiar with them, do a takeoff on the plans. They're most likely going to get the site work here. They're doing a job for us in Lexington. They concluded that there is approximately 17,000 yards of export. 13,000 a loom, and 4,000 yards of fill. They are expecting most of these trailers to go about 1.7 miles from the site to D&H Loom, located at 2352 Main Street. So it's not a long commute. They believe there's about 607 trailer loads. They believe approximately 36 trucks a day for a total of 17 days. And this won't be 17 consecutive days. As you can imagine, they start stripping topsoil and move it, and there'll be a couple of days off. But it's basically a tractor every 10 minutes. It's not a lot. All of the pickups will be made on the actual job site. There'll be no parking on Main Street. Soil and timber hauling would not be before 9 a.m. or after 3 p.m. No deliveries or pickups on Sundays or federal holidays. All the trucking, while it's sitting there waiting, this is arrangements we made with the police department. Their engines will be shut off. There'll be demudding coming on the site so that we're not tracking onto Main Street. And all of the trucks will be restricted to Route 62 or Route 2. And that's it on the trucking. Last point I want to make, Rich touched, there's a lot of folks that are sort of new to this, and we're acquiring the land. We're starting construction to move the owner on Highland Street in the next 3 weeks. And we're going to be acquiring the land no later than the spring. We've worked with this planning board for a year, devising a plan. This has sort of evolved to avoid doing a bunch of single families. So I think it's important for everyone to understand because, you know, I've heard there's some folks that want to buy it for a park. I've gotten a lot of different information, but we're acquiring the land. It's going to be developed. And, you know, we think this is the best way to do it. We've made a lot of adjustments on it based upon the feedback from this board. But I think it's very important to note, we're not going away. We're going to develop it. It's just a question of which way. We're starting construction on Faye's house no later than the end of the month.
The one last item I mentioned was the construction plan to support the trucking plan. And once the entrance is set up and staged for the beginning of the construction to clear the trees, we'll have the area of the trees remain circled around with construction fencing to protect them. And then we'd have other staging areas for the vehicles on left and right and in the back area here. So it'll be all focused on Main Street. The same entrance that's proposed for the vehicles will be for the construction site access. There'll be no access along this whole side except for, you know, removal of the pavement for the old driveway on that. And that is the limit of our presentation. Also, I have attached here is the conventional plan that we can talk about if the board would like, which would show a comparison of what the grading would look like for the alternative development. But what I'd like to do is to just summarize it. There were a lot of good questions asked at the last meeting. How much was the wetlands? How much was the park? How much area was the slope? And the initial answer is that the park is a larger square footage than the wetland area is. And the area along the side that we talked about for the slope along this side and a little bit in the back is about 10,000 or so. And a lot of that is due to the grading. It's due to the requirements or the requests from staff and your safety officials to have it laid out as a loop, have it be more of a better product, have it walkability, connect to the properties abutting to us. And so this is a minor concession in regards to the overall neighborhood plan for this piece of property, which we vetted out in great detail with the closest neighbors. Areas of open space that are common are less distance than an acre of land that you have down in your larger districts. You know, the applicant has done an additional PRD down on Commonwealth where there's a significant amount of acreage given as open space. When you get into this lower density of 10,000 square foot per lot, there's smaller setbacks. There's additional screening that's provided and that we negotiated and spoke about with the abutters. And the grading is also to reflect the comments from the abutters to move the homes away. And if you lower them, then they're not looking window to window. And so there's many specific aspects that have gone through and evolved at the request of the abutters that do not show up on the desk of staff when they have to review the specific regulation for a specific project. And so I'm available to talk about that further as we move forward, and I'd like to talk, answer any questions right now from the board.
Okay, I mean, we could just go back to our seats. I don't know that there's a whole lot new for us to look at. This thing is gonna kill me. Okay, so thanks for the presentations. First thing I'd like to get down to is, I think you answered a number of questions and clarified a number of points from the last meeting, but if I boil down the changes that have been identified relative to the prior plans that we've seen, all I can recall is just that you're going to expand or reconfigure the open space a little bit.
Yes,
In that one corner coming in, and then in that park area.
correct.
And there's no other changes being proposed.
Everything else is under the ground relative to drainage and sewer and things like that, yes.
Okay. Because, I mean, there was substantial public comment at the last meeting. And we also had, I think, Kate in particular, I think, had identified one key question that we wanted answered. And I think you said some things about the open space configuration, but I guess I should turn it over to you to kind of, because you had asked the question, because I don't know that I really heard it clearly.
Sorry. Yeah. The question was, is there enough open space that you're proposing that meets the standards outlined in the bylaw? And we are still not sure, I don't think, based on your presentation.
Well, I guess we're looking at 10.2.9.1, right? And so it's basically the shape, dimension, character, and location suitable to assure its use for a park, recreation, conservation, or agricultural purposes. And as you had mentioned, at least by all the residents of the PRD. But then to determine whether the intent of this section has been satisfied, we'll consider the extent to which the land having one or more of the following characteristics is included in the proposed open space. And so as I go down through this list, which I'm not going to read word for word, I think there is E, land which is to be developed for active recreational use, including playing fields, boat launching areas, playgrounds, and neighborhood parks. So I think it's really solely the neighborhood park of that. It's passive recreation for the most part, not active.
Correct.
And then there's no new trail network. Did you talk to the abutting property about, there was the trail that head that you put towards the, what's it called?
Junction Square. So that abutting parcel is open space. It's to be preserved as an open park. So whatever rights are there, they'll be
So
welcome.
you haven't been
We
in
haven't,
contact?
but,
Because we've asked a couple of times.
Right, and we requested the planning director to provide that, and so to have to go any further, it's a burden upon the applicant to keep researching that. The merit of the plan and the conductivity to the abutting open space is met. If we can't access that, we won't. We can just walk down our side and stay on our land. So it's access to that same property line has been provided, which is we were asked to do early on.
Okay, so. There's an echo? Okay. Well, Okay. I don't know if anybody else can identify.
Yeah, I mean,
Criteria
just
here.
to that point, like, I think that question is fundamentally unanswered. Like, do you have enough open space per square foot? It does need to be like to the square foot.
Yes, we do. And you do not have that updated information in front of you tonight. What I wanted to do was to talk about the reason why those slopes are there, which you questioned as whether that was merit for it to be considered open space. And we believe that that should count
Okay.
because of the working with the abutters. We had previous plans that were up higher level and flat, and the units were closer, and they asked us to move those away. So
Okay.
we have excess open space on the plan, and so we can provide that information to you.
Okay. I mean, do you think that it's possible that you might need to have fewer units to provide the quality open space that's required under the bylaw?
No, I do not. Like we said, we believe the requirements are met, and we'll provide that more detailed information that you requested.
Okay. I look forward to seeing that.
Great.
Other questions from the board? Nothing? Okay, then I think we're ready for some public comment, and then I think we'll talk about our next steps. So I'm opening up for public comment. There's a microphone here at the center of the room. Please come to the center, state your name and address. But then also I want to note that we've received a substantial amount of public comment previously, that really what we want to do is to focus the comments on the kind of state of the process that we're in now, which is, first of all, we've had some changes that were proposed. We have some open questions regarding basement spaces, the trucking plan, the density that have been answered tonight. And so relative to the new information that we have, okay, that's what we're looking to get further comment about, because the public has had an opportunity to comment about the sort of state of the project as it is, and we're really now trying to move to the next set of questions. Yes.
Aaron Brown, 86 Highland Street. I'm a butter to the non-property, planned property. The comment on the trail going through Junction Square, the B lot of Junction Square behind my property is open space. There is an unmaintained trail there, if you would call it that. But to transit to the town center, people would have to go through Junction Square proper, which is not open space. I've looked at these deeds and stuff online. The second question, that was just clarification. The question I have is, for the four abutting properties to the expanded park, how are they going to differentiate between the backyards of those properties and the park in such a way that the backyards don't continue to expand into the park?
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Jack Madigan, 215 Prairie Street. I'm not really sure what the point of tonight's meeting was if they didn't answer a whole bunch of our questions from last time. I thought that's what the next meeting was supposed to do. We had looked at open space, they had claimed 33%. Then when you sit there and you add it all up, which was what your question was, it's counting all the land between Center Village and they're counting that as open space on their thing. That is, it says in the bylaw that's not included. So they were up at 33%, you need 25%. So I'm not really sure how they are still giving us open space, okay? Obviously, I agree with your point that it's obviously still too many units. And then secondly, with regard to the dump truck and that part of the plan, which we just saw for the first time tonight, the new plan, they've reduced the number of dump trucks from, I think, 850 down to like 700, but that still is just fill and removal of dirt. It has nothing to do with the trees, and when they sit there and they get rid of all the trees, that's going to be how many more truckloads of trees and waste, roots, and everything else that has to come out. That's not counted on the initial figures that we're seeing for the trucking out of material. So that's also a question that's still outstanding. We had brought that up last time. It was, again, was not raised again tonight. And so we're looking forward to having all this additional information that I thought they were going to have prior to this meeting, so that we could go through it and ask some very intelligent questions and everything. But they still have not provided that. So I'm kind of disappointed with this presentation. Thank you.
Larry Maslin, 188 Conant Street. The first meeting I came to was the last one at the Harvey Wheeler Center, and I wrote a letter to the planning board, and I don't know how that's accounted for in this whole process, but to briefly summarize what I wrote is, it has to do with open space, and I'm not quite sure why we're planning a development that we were told at the end of the last meeting was the septic system may fail after 50 years. I mean, a lot of people now are talking about what the climate will be like 50 years from now, and why this development, and let me just get to the point. What I recommended is that the water management on the site could be well improved by having less impervious surface. One way to accomplish this would be to get rid of the septic system, put in underground parking, have gray water drainage, have composting toilets. That underground area could also be used for geothermal, which would certainly benefit the town. So there's a very different way of looking at this, and I just didn't know how that letter gets incorporated into this discussion. So I'll end it there.
Okay, thanks.
Beverly Bryant, 175 Conant Street. I'm trying to get to grips with the top left-hand section of this, which abuts the train track and the townland. Now, when I'm standing in the townland beside the train track, I know I'm not very tall, but I'm looking up at least 3 or 4 feet to the tracks. And you're looking at that house going down to the tracks. So you're going to have to put a lot of fill in to elevate that above the level of the train track. Quite a lot of fill. And so my concern is, I thought that the boundary between the development and the townland was supposed to be on a level, right? There wasn't there wasn't supposed to be a difference in level. If that's the case, I mean, you're going to have to put a wall in there to stop 10 feet of fill from draining down into what is, in fact, the little catchment basin that you assured me last time was going to catch all the drainage that came down to the wetland from this development. So now you have the catchment basin, you have a line there which surely must be rising up 10 plus feet in order to be looking down on the train track. The other question I have is, have you talked to the MBTA at all about the impact of this development on the tracks? They are continually fussing at their tracks and subsidence and drainage and goodness knows what. Have you talked to them at all about this development? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I just say one thing about that, just briefly? We're not proposing 10 feet of fill along the train tracks. The houses will be below the elevation of the train tracks along the back. They are higher in elevation. They will remain that way. We're not adjusting the grade along the common lot line with the town land. Currently, right now, there's a chain link fence along that entire property. We're matching existing grade at the best location, which is up at this location on the high side of the driveway. And so there is about an 8-foot difference in elevation from the high end near Center Village down to the low at 130, with the train tracks being up about 142 or so.
Okay, and I think that what we'll do is,
Sure,
it
but that
worked
was kind of
last
a big
time
one.
to hold the answers and just get the questions, and so let's try that again this time. Thanks.
Nancy Kellogg, 104 Ministerial Drive. I haven't heard anybody talk about the impact of the traffic on Route 62 at 8 o'clock in the morning.
That actually has been covered in prior meetings.
36 units, if they're all two-car garages, means 72, there's the potential of 72 cars joining all the cars that come from Maynard, come from Acton, cut through. It's getting so I, on Ministerial Drive, can't get to West Concord in the morning because of the traffic.
Thank you. Next
comment?
comment? No, thanks. Next comment.
So I have a question.
Name and
a comment.
address.
Cynthia Katz, 20 Conant Street. My question is about the density comparisons and whether you've included all of your open space in your figures for your density comparisons. And then my comment is I hope the planning board is gonna take into account the neighbors, the neighborhood, West Concord, because the comments have been to reduce this project by 25% at every meeting I've been to. That would reduce the number of cars, increase open space, and would still give the development a feeling of density. And if that all came down, it might not be so bad, but 70 extra cars, 70 plus extra cars, and reduce each house to only have one garage. So we heard a lot of things at that last meeting.
Ellen Quackenbush, 206 Prairie Street. So I looked at, the gentleman from Sims looked at the GIS information and assessor, I think just GIS. I looked at GIS information in terms of the square footage on houses on Main Street, both sides, and assessors. And the density of the development is, I'll be happy to send you information, is let's say in the neighborhood is 76%, something like that. The density of Sims is more like 80. So I don't believe, if you take into account open space, that it really does achieve the goal of fitting within the neighborhood. The other thing is I believe the PRD is supposed to benefit the goals of the town. And one of the goals is carbon footprint. And if you've ever been behind this development to see the trees that are back there, they are granddaddies, they're huge. They will be removed, and I think that the beech and maple or whatever they're gonna be planted or they are on the front side are minuscule in comparison. So I think the carbon footprint calculus just isn't there. And finally, the trucks. You're gonna have loggers coming in there, and loggers that are gonna be removing these trees because they're huge. And where are they gonna go? Are they gonna go Route 2 by Concord Children's Center or Route 62 and impact our neighbors in Maynard? And I just think that, sure, DH Loam is taking the loam. Who is going to take the impact of these trucks, these loggers, and removing the enormous trees? I think that we need to take that environmental impact into account. Thank you.
Scott Richardson, 260 Elsinore Street. I have a question about the trucking plan. There was an estimate of the amount of trucks that I think is at variance with what the community safety officer said. Sure, great. So I guess what I was looking for is someone who's been interested in this whole question about trying to picture the number of trucks that are involved in the diesel particulates that will be emitted associated with the removal of the earth and the removal of the trees. I'm trying to figure out how many trucks that's going to be, how much diesel particulate that will be, the impact on that on the ride-out playground, which is certainly very nearby, and then also the Thoreau School, which is nearby, and then the Concord Senior Center and the Concord Children's Center. So we're going to have these diesel trucks, and I think so it's very important to know how many there are going to be, when they're going to be transiting. And I'm struck tonight by the fact that they say they're going to turn off the trucks while they're waiting at the facility, but then they'll start up. And my understanding of the way a diesel engine works is that it tends to produce a lot of diesel particulate at startup time. So I'd like to have someone who really understands those things tell us if that's the best way to minimize the pollutants which our children will be breathing. And then just a brief comment, I am struck by the position, I'll say, of the gentleman who spoke that this is going to be developed. If you've heard things in the community that don't sit well with you, I would encourage you to consider the fact that these are people who live in this community. They care about this community. We're asking our representatives to make sure that the process is followed. Sims Development is asking for a number of exceptions to the rules of development. And so I believe the burden is on the developer to show a spirit of cooperation with the neighbors. And for a moment there, I wondered if that was sort of leaving the project. And I don't think that's a good thing for the project. Thank you.
Yeah, Michael Amster, 44 Prairie Street. Just a couple of comments. In the last meeting, we were told that these buildings were going to be solar ready. I'm not sure I understand what that means exactly. Does that mean that there's going to be a roof on them and there's going to be wires? What does solar ready mean? No clue. And not to belabor all these points, I haven't heard anybody say anything about how this development is going to benefit the town and have it be consistent with the development plans that the town has agreed to. So thank you.
Sue Felshen, 19 Sunnyside Lane. Mature trees store a lot of carbon, but it's relatively minor compared to the amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases output by use of natural gas, by electricity for air conditioning, heating, cooling, dryers, and all other energy uses of a household. I would like to hear specifically how this development will meet the site review requirements of Section 11.6 for sustainability. I would feel a lot better about the number of units, if there was 25% amount less energy use. But regardless of how nice I would feel about it, I would like to know that this project meets the guidelines. Thanks.
Violating my own rule, I'll interject and say that we're proposing for 2020 town meeting to add site plan review to the PRD process. It's not currently.
Carleen Hempel, 50 Highland Street. I just wanted to pipe up about a couple of things, and that is just even to correct a previous comment about lack of spirit of collaboration and cooperation with the neighborhoods. I don't think that's a fair characterization of Symes. They met with me and my neighbors probably 4 or 5 times. I know they met, as Rich so eloquently said, at the kitchen table of various people, including Mr. Marquis. I don't know if he's here. I know they met with other members of the line that stood up here, and I think, people asked to protect the trees. They have proposed a plan that protects the trees. People have asked not to let the trucks go down the small side streets. They have said that they're not going to let the trucks go down the side streets. They're going to, I think what I heard tonight is they're going to push the trucks back off of even Main Street when they're doing their construction. People asked for fewer 2-car garages. I think there are now 14 1-car garages in this project. I'm not sure of the number, but what I'm saying is I think this group is pretty amenable to listening to what people are saying, and I think they're trying. And everyone would love a parkland. Everyone would like fewer units. But I just think the characterization, the sort of adversarial stance that is portrayed is not necessarily fair to this group that I personally have found responsive to our concerns. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Hi, good evening. My name's Stephen Crane. I'm the new town manager, and I just wanted to offer a comment to say that obviously this process got underway before I started here, but now that I'm here, depending on any action at the board or any decision the board may or may not take, I'm here to support the work of the planning board and offer my services as potentially a facilitator to make sure that the balance between doing what you have the right to do and doing what is right to do is struck. I'm just listening to the comments and the presentation by the developer, and I do hear that adjustments have been made. And in a previous life, I was the director of planning and community development as well, so I have some experience with this. And I just want to make sure that both sides are hearing each other and in meaningful ways. And like I said, I do see the accommodations, but I also see some threshold things that don't seem to be addressed. And then my only question for the developer would be, when do you intend to break ground? And if it is over the winter, what's your plan for diesel trucks that need to idle in cold weather?
Sherry Fletcher, 102 Prairie Street. My concern is the septic system. There's proposed that this is up to, what is it, right up to 9,900 gallons a day. And if it went over 10,000, they would have to build a on-site wastewater treatment plant on-site. So right now there's planned that it would be only 9,900, in which you have 8 walkout bedrooms. I mean, not bedrooms. You have 8 walkout houses in the back that are going to be finished basements, and what is going to prevent any of those turning some of that basement into a bedroom, which would then put them into that 10,000 gallon per day over the mark. So that's a concern. Then the other concern is when changing the topography of that land with all the trees that soak up the water, the cubic feet of dirt that's being moved and shoved around, and plus the 17,000 cubic yards of dirt that's being taken out. Then there's a filling of the 5,000, I thought, square feet of isolated wetland. They're going to fill that up. And I just wondered if there should be a groundwater study of how this changes in the land for water absorption. You're going to have all these houses now on the land, all the asphalt with the roads and the sidewalks and all that other stuff. How is that water going to play underground and even on the ground and being absorbed? And I really hope that the town would ask these developers to give us a plan and study of how that's all going to work, because I know it will change. And I think that's all my concern. No. Oh, yes, one other. The bridge on Commonwealth Avenue, last time we met, it was said that that bridge would not hold those big, heavy trucks coming with all that dirt and all those trees, and so that they couldn't use that bridge over Commonwealth Avenue that's by the Sunoco, that's gas station right there that goes down by the prison. And so they're going to use Route 62, but on Route 62, if they went through town, there's a little small bridge there by Dunkin' Donuts. Has that been studied to make sure that that can withstand all that tonnage that goes through with those trucks? But if they don't go that way and they go the other way into Maynard, there's that other small bridge over there by that Valley Sports area. Is that bridge safe enough for those trucks to go through? Has there been a study on those bridges? I know our bridges are getting old and getting ready to fail, so this would really do it, I think. I don't know if there's been a study on that. And that's it.
Priscilla Miller. I live at 223 Losbrook Road, but I spend my days at 1965 Main Street. And at the last meeting, there was a lot of discussion and concerns about the drainage on the property. And unless it's the acoustics here tonight, I didn't hear anything about the drainage issue. Regarding the trucking, I'd like to know, and I think all of us would, which direction these trucks are going to be exiting and returning, and, you know, in the construction phase, when, you know, where is the material coming from? Because Main Street already has an exorbitant amount of truck traffic. And my other comment would be the open space. As I understand it, the open space is for the community. If that's the case, I would not in the least feel comfortable going into property where people reside. I've never walked down the Riverwalk, and that's supposed to be open to the community because I respect the occupants, the owners. And just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no one else at the mic, I will turn it back to the applicants for responses to the questions that you have answers for tonight. And Nathan, Nathan had one more question. The board will take their privilege and ask another question.
I asked this because I see our former member Gary sitting here. I haven't heard anything about HERS ratings or anything like that, and I know that's been a consistent question that's been asked by this board and by Gary after he left the board. So hopefully one of the two you can address that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
So, Mr. Chairman, I got to apologize. We did nothing on the junction. We'll get it done for the next meeting.
You mean discussion with the
correct? Correct.
With the
we've
Junction
been too busy getting all the engineering, et cetera, done. We booted that. We'll contact them in time for the next meeting. So there's no dancing around that. On the open space, you're new to the board, and what I'd ask is that you look at the previous plan that was submitted where we had the units up against Center Village. So we actually moved the units away at the request of Center Village and this board to preserve those trees, and we took it from the open space. So I kind of feel if now all of a sudden that comes back and bites us, that we've got to move the units back and aggravate all the people at Center Village. So there has to be a recognition of what was done there, and those plans do exist where we had all those units up there. But nonetheless, Rich will get you the open space calc, and then we'll make a decision on whether or not to meet it the letter of the law. We can push the units back or try and keep it that way. On the trucking, the reason for the delta is we're hauling loom. Originally speaking, it was all gravel. When you pack gravel, it's 22 to 24 yards per truck because of the voids from the rocks. But when loom packs tight, it's 28 to 29 yards per truck, so that reduced the trucks. And I apologize for not getting into the trees. They're in that letter that was up there. It's 24 loads of logs, 6 loads of chips from in the stumps. So it's a total of 30 trucks. That's in the trucking plan. I just didn't bring it up. I apologize. I've heard folks talk of neighbors. To me, I've tried to work with the immediate abutters. I haven't had one person stand up and complain that's an immediate abutter. I've got people 2 blocks down the street. I don't know how to address you. I've worked very hard with the folks on Highland. I've worked very hard with the Marquis. I've worked very hard with the Center Village folks. You've heard them. We've tried to accommodate the abutters. I don't know how to accommodate people 3 blocks away. I just don't know how to do it. Solar ready. What solar ready means is we're running piping from and running a circuit board in the basement up to the roof. We're making sure the roof is structurally sound. That's code now. In addition, we're putting recharge stations in the garages. So that's what that means. We can't reduce the density, not on this scheme. A 25% reduction moves me right back to the conventional plan. These units were designed for diversity of housing. There are units in here that are as small as 1,700 square feet, and they sell in the $700,000 to $800,000 range. There's units as high as 2,500 square feet. So if we start reducing these down by 25%, that gets us right back to the conventional plan, which are all 4,000 to 5,000 square foot houses. It does, you know, you can figure out the math. You know, this is done to create diversity of housing. Some first floor master bedrooms, some starter homes, some money homes, some 2,500 to 2,800 square foot homes where we can make money. We're not making money at 1,700 to 1,800 square feet. So there's some economics to it, and that's what the reduction does, is it pushes us right out of there. And let's see, when to break ground? Probably break ground in the spring. We're gonna break ground on the new owner's house probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but the actual breaking ground here will probably be in the spring. I think the town manager asked about that. Be a pretty tough site to try and do over the winter because of all the earth removal and the frost and everything else. And then one of the last points I want to bring up is there's a lot of concern about the septic system. Well, because of the size of the septic system, it has to be inspected 4 times a year. The pumps and everything else by professional. The Board of Health will demand reports for a septic system. And to me, that's a lot safer than 22 individual septic systems that don't require any inspections, that are going to have roughly the same gallonage. You know, so that there's a lot more safety to one system, and the the restrictions the Board of Health puts on it for inspections and things. And HERS rating, I booted it on that too. So I owe you that. You got other stuff, Rich?
I touched upon the drainage. You'll have the consultant review that and get back to you in writing about that. He touched upon the septic system, and then the open space information we'll provide to you in more detail also. Any other additional comments? All I could do as an engineer is compare the conventional, which you have in this PowerPoint presentation at the end, to this cluster development, where comparison of tree clearing, open space values, public benefits could be looked at in a general manner. That's all I can do from an engineer, is compare those apples. Other than that, we can do our best to make everything work on the property for all the concerns that everybody has and present it back to you.
Okay, and just to clarify for the public, what we're deliberating on here is a special permit process for a planned residential development. And planned residential development is, as it states in the bylaw, an alternative pattern of residential land development. It's an alternative to, most of the time, a subdivision. Okay, and so basically, when they say a conventional plan, they're describing a potential subdivision that could be potentially built in lieu of this. And presuming that no waivers would be required, subdivisions, if everything is done correctly, can be just built without, we review them, but we have much less latitude in that. And so the pattern of a conventional development, of course, is to divide the property into conforming lots, which would be, 1/4 acre lots in this case. And there would be reasons that certain parts could not be made into buildable lots, but by and large, the units would be spread over the property. And again, I want to clarify, we have not seen a preliminary subdivision plan. We can't really speculate about the number of units that could actually be built. That would be a whole separate process. But what we need to do as a board is to determine whether the plan that's before us is preferable to what might happen. Again, not knowing what exactly could happen, but just so relative to a subdivision pattern of development. So I think then where we're at, because it sounds that we don't, we'll have another public comment period at the end.
You brought up something that I think that needs to be brought up.
But, ma'am.
The town meeting passed a resolution that any subdivision has to have 20% affordable housing.
there's, no. There's, I mean, we can ask our town planner to comment, but
If I could jump in, Mr. Chairman, whether it's affordable or not, that's an extra criteria that I wasn't referring to. I was just talking about grading, clearing, and tree removal and earthwork. So that's kind of the context of that.
I was just taking and expanding upon that to really get back to the previous comments about this will be developed either way, that, you know, and basically to try to explain where that came from potentially, okay? And the decisions that we make here as a board are really about whether to grant or recommend that the ZBA grant a special permit, because we imagine that this is a better pattern of development for the town than what might otherwise be built. Okay, so that's all I would, because I don't know that the public is necessarily aware of that.
Sure.
Okay, so. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, go ahead and you can answer the subdivision question.
The bylaw I believe you're referring to is the inclusionary housing bylaw, which does require the reservation of land for affordable housing purposes for a subdivision that would be set aside for a period of 3 years in which the town can purchase that property to develop affordable housing by paying, you know, just compensation for that portion of land that is reserved.
Right, and so it's not that the developer has to provide 20% affordable housing in a subdivision.
Would not be creating affordable housing. They are required to set.
Be able to provide this, yeah. Okay. Any other, so now we're really back to where are we at in this process? So we still have some information that we've been offered, but I think we also have generally a sense of the plan, and I had wondered whether there would be significant changes to the plan, but there are only minor changes that have been proposed to the plan since our last time. So, Rich,
So we'd resubmit all the requested information. Elizabeth will receive it, have staff review it, and then she would select a time in which to bring it back to the board. So that would be the typical process. Unless she has a different, we'd follow her direction.
Yeah, I mean, and tonight, I mean, we, you know, usually in this process, we would get submissions, let's say 2 weeks or 10 days at least ahead of our meeting, so that town staff would be able to comment upon, you know, the submissions. Today, we just received this information in the meeting, so clearly there has not been that kind of formal process. So there are a number of balls still in the air here. So, you know, we could have our next meeting and, you know, deliberate at that time. I don't know, I'd like to take other comments from the board at this time, just the sense of the board.
My sense is that I do not feel like this is quality open space and meeting the intent of the bylaw in a way that brings significant benefit to the area. So I appreciate that the applicant is hearing or working with the abutters in terms of, you know, setbacks from immediate abutters. But in terms of an overall benefit and that quality of open space that's open to the residents of the area and then the surrounding residents, it just doesn't seem high quality. But that's my impression to start the ball rolling.
Other comments from the board?
Yeah, actually, I just want to build off of that, and I know it's kind of weird too. I know the request has been made to have the open space percentage and the actual square footage of that. When you do that, can you break it out on one of the maps and just have it by 4 sections? One that I guess would consider a buffer area, so that would be the areas just going along the edge of the property, the wetlands, the filtration field, and the actual park at the front. I think those four would give us a sense of what's really being used as open space.
Yes. Other comments from the board?
No, I hear the applicant saying that there's certain changes that were made to accommodate some interests, and that's great. And I think we just want to keep going to get to a plan that works. It sounds like we're close.
Yeah, Al?
I'm not quite sure I understand the 25% reduction, increasing the square footage of the units. So, yeah, sorry about that. My question was the reduction of 25%. I think we should think of reduction in footprint rather than number of units. I think that was the question, and the answer was about reducing the number of units, which will increase the square footage. So that's...
Well, that was in comparison with a subdivision plan. Basically, I think the speculation is that if you had a conventional subdivision, that the units would be large houses.
I think it's $1 to square foot factor that's being
More, that's probably more the factor. Okay. So I think next we need to figure out a timeline. So I guess when could you provide the information that we've described? What would be a reasonable amount of lead time for that? And then I hope this time have some opportunity to review prior to our next meeting. So any ideas? Ma'am, yeah, we're going to follow our process here. So, Elizabeth.
It would depend on when the full submission is made.
Yeah, and so we're looking for a full submission of, so
the next meeting date is the 12th of November. Again, that's...
You'd need something in this week, right? Or less, yeah. So
you can't make the 12th of November, that doesn't give town staff enough time to review it. The next meeting after that is only...
I mean, presuming answers aren't all going to come in tomorrow.
Right. Well, we said we wanted to
And,
do
and by a full
two
submission,
more.
you mean plans, right, the revised plans, the site plan and the,
So what happens is the copies of all the revised information and the plans come in, and they get distributed to 8 different departments for comments. So, you know what, I give myself roughly 2 days to do that. Because I still continue with everything else that happens in the planning division. That goes to town staff. The town staff is given, usually it's 2 weeks minimum to review something, and then it takes them at least a week to provide you comments. So typically, it's a 4-week period for me to be able to provide the board a revised staff review, a staff report. So
I think the next one is like the 19th because
no,
of,
the next one after the 12th is November 26th.
oh, November 26th.
2 days before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Can I?
Okay.
May and thank you to the new town manager for using the word threshold, but I think there's a threshold question here about whether the current plan substantively works. So from my perspective, I wouldn't want there to be a circulation of all the plans to all the departments before we settle that question.
Well, I guess the answer, the question would be then, do you have a pretty strong sense, even realizing we don't have a complete set of information about what your position would be now. Do we do a straw poll, basically give an indication of where we're at on this, pending any further information that we might get? Would that maybe help in this process?
So the other opportunity for the board is it's going to take a couple of days for the applicant to pull everything together. The board has a meeting on November 12th.
Yep.
The board can deliberate on your position on the 12th if you wish, or wait till you receive. It's a difficult position. Whether you have enough information you feel to make a recommendation to the Board of Appeals, or wait to get the additional information if that's gonna answer questions and provide you better feedback for your position. That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to want to see any energy HERS rating, any energy efficiency information per unit or for the entire thing. That's going to weigh into my deliberation a good deal.
Other positions from folks?
What's the question?
So I guess there are two different proposals in front of us. One is that we get the questions answered, we get the town staff to comment on all this information more formally, and then we come back as a board on November 26th and we deliberate on our position on the project. The alternative is that we conclude our discussion tonight on November 12th at our very next meeting, even lacking some of this information. If we have more considered opinions, that we could maybe establish that there then.
The question is to wait or?
Yeah, to wait to begin our deliberations until we have everything in place, or to deliberate at the next meeting. So that's all.
I vote for waiting.
Right.
But Kate, does that get at your question about, are we going to get more information back and then say, I'm sorry, but this plan really isn't, where we're heading? I think you're trying to avoid sending them back to the drawing board again.
Yeah.
I'm avoiding wasting paper.
Yeah.
I think there's a threshold question that should be, and we asked it in a very clear and pointed way at the last meeting, and now we're all here again, and we didn't get it answered.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that, as was mentioned, we've had meetings on this property several times. There has been some movement in the right direction. I agree that some of the fundamental questions that have come up repeatedly have been dropped or are just not answered. So I'm hopeful that in the next meeting that we have on this property, that everything is included, so that we can make a proper judgment on what we think is the right direction to go. And in that sense, I don't want us to waste your time, and I don't want you to waste our time and the town's time. So I strongly recommend, for my personal support, and I'm sure others on the board, that you not waste time and you answer the questions that have been posed by us and by members of the community. So.
And maybe when we get the map and the table that you just that's exactly what we're looking for. Maybe you come in for a meeting before the next public meeting with our staff to talk about it, and so it seems like there's maybe just a couple steps there.
Okay. So I think we want to go just for the 26th. Sounds like to me. Let's just deliberate on the 26th. Okay. Then I think that concludes our work for tonight on this topic. Yes?
One statement, we will try
On the 26th. I bet it will be. It's a slow week.
2 days before
It's
Thanksgiving.
just a slow week. We'll see. All right. All right. Please, if you are exiting at this point, please leave the building entirely. We have a lot more business to do tonight. I actually would encourage people to stay. We've got lots of really good things we're working on. Now the fun part begins. Man, I got to get a drink of water. Not raise it.
Careful, I've booby trapped everything.
Are we too nice as a planning board? This is the third time I don't turn. This doesn't turn off. Taking this hostile attitude. Oh yeah, it's awful.
Yes. Say it again. Well, we are going to talk about our bylaws that we're proposing for 2020. So is that one of them? I can't debate you. So. Okay. Yes, we should be getting to that.
I want to say, I don't want to deliberate on this guy.
Right.
Like,
I think we've had it about 3 times prior to joining.
It's like a continuation of right. It's the discussion of the bylaws that we are proposing.
Sorry.
We're still in process.
The information was never submitted.
Okay.
A lot of the things you would need, the waivers
we don't know that.
Okay, everyone would like to resume the meeting now. We have a number of other items for tonight. Again, if you are leaving, please leave fully so that we don't disturb the meeting. So the next item that we'd like to discuss is the 13B Commonwealth Avenue proposed building design discussion. So do we have a representative? Okay, thank you. Patrick Cleary.
Good evening. For those who may not, my name is Patrick Cleary. My company is called FX Investments, and I am, along with the Boynton Company and Oak Tree Development, one of the developers and current owners of Brookside Square in West Concord Village. That's what we're here to discuss. We also, as part of Brookside Square, own 13B Commonwealth Avenue, which is a small 31,000 square foot property that is just to the southwest of Brookside Square. For those of you who may not have followed along or been involved in the planning process for Brookside Square, just thought I'd give a little bit of background as to how the 13B Commonwealth Ave development plan has come about. In 2010, end of 2009, 2010, through 2013, my partners and I participated in the planning exercises and permitting of Brookside Square. We actually came onto the scene, fortuitously, in terms of timing, at the very tail end of the West Concord Village master planning process, multiple year effort to set the vision for the village. There was a great deal of attention paid to how Brookside Square fit into that vision. And in working with, at that time, the West Concord Task Force, which then became the West Concord Advisory Committee, we set out to try to achieve 10 separate objectives within that master plan, which I believe we were able to do. A major goal at that time for the master plan was improvement of traffic circulation. And as I'm sure everyone knows and can remember and currently experiences, the curb cut coming out of the commuter rail really only had one way in, one way out right in front of the gates of the track. And it was our task to try to get that traffic through 50 Beharrell Street out to the western portion of Commonwealth Ave, so that anybody taking a right and going west can make a very easy turn. Anybody turning left and heading east could do so at a safe distance from the tracks and be able to queue up rather than try to get out and beat the arms, the gates from going up and down. It took about a year to assemble 13B. As you can imagine, it was quite a feat when the property owner knows that he's really the linchpin of your deal, but we were able to do that. And 13B was included in the site plan approval and the special permit that we received as part of the Brookside Square development, and key to that traffic circulation. At that time, there was a 6,750 square foot retail building along with 27 parking spaces and the access road in and out that were part of that site plan approval. And once we got the approval, we set out to make sure that the main project in the back got underway, under construction, stabilized, leased up before we really turned our attention back to 13B. So from 2014 through 2015, we constructed Brookside, and from that point till about 2018, we were just really solely focused on getting Brookside to a point where we were comfortable and stabilized. At the beginning of 2018, we started turning our attention back to 13B. And as part of the approval process that we went through and site plan approval for Brookside, we were required to come back to the planning board to seek design review approvals. What is the architectural aesthetic of the building going to be? And we would do that after working with the West Concord Advisory Committee. So in 2018, beginning of 2018, we began our meetings with the advisory committee. We had 3 meetings, one in January, February, one in April. We participated in a site walkthrough as well. And we went through 3 iterations of our plan. All those plans had really just contemplated a 1-story commercial retail building with the parking associated with that. It was made clear to us repeatedly during that process that the advisory committee members felt strongly that the building should be a 2-story building. The feeling was that it fit better into the fabric of Commonwealth Ave, so that it wouldn't be a 1-story building, which was referred to on a few occasions as kind of a sawtooth effect to the west side of Commonwealth Ave, and that it should be 2 stories. That posed a number of issues for us. I won't bore you with all of them, but it was a little bit of a departure from our thought process, and it needed quite a bit of work to get a handle on the feasibility of adding a 2nd story. It's not a big building, but it does effectively more than double the budget. It has impacts on parking. It has impacts on wastewater, which we had, calculated during the Brookside Square process. But that being said, it was very strongly felt by the members of the committee, as well as a number of the residents who participated in the process, that it should be 2 stories. So over the past year, or more than a year, we've been working together, myself and my partners, to try to get the project to a point where we feel that it's feasible. And that's really where we are today. We had intended on going to the West Concord Advisory Committee prior to coming to the planning board, but there was an opening last week that we were made aware of, and we were asked, would you want to introduce the concept tonight? And we jumped at the opportunity to do so. We will be going back to the advisory committee for, I imagine, a number of more sessions to work through the aesthetic to make sure we're on the same page. Prior to doing that, I would love to, again, just introduce the concept and make sure that, I was hoping to make sure that I'm on the right path, and that the planning board, feels the same way as the advisory committee feels, that the two-story mixed-use nature of the building is appropriate. We will need to, and one of the challenges here is that we will need to modify the existing special permit that went along with Brookside and has been in place for the past 6 years, I guess it would be, 5 or 6 years, to account for a parking ratio that has been adjusted or would be adjusted. There are open space calculations which will be adjusted. There's stormwater drainage calculations, et cetera, et cetera. It really has to do with the civil engineering of the project. And before my partners and I run off and spend a ton of money scrapping our old civil engineering plans and starting new ones, we'd love to get a sense that we're at least heading in the right direction. So I thought I would give you a quick introduction. I want to be respectful of your time. I have a much more detailed, if anyone at the advisory committee can tell you, we can get pretty detailed with our plans and explanations, but I don't think that's appropriate tonight. But we will be returning after we visit with the advisory committee for an official process through the planning board and then ultimately through the ZBA if the modification to the special permit is appropriate and warranted. But this is effectively the location of the initial footprint for the building. What you see here is 6,750 square feet. We've made a few modifications to it that I can explain, but obviously it's just a site plan look, down at it, aerial. We did add yes.
I don't know where you are.
Okay.
Can you just, thank you. What's there now? Oh, this is the grassy lot, and then you get to the sugar farm.
Correct. Well, the parking, which is in blue right now, up on the screen, that exists. And that's part of our...
So that Star Salon, and then I keep walking, and it's that grassy spot. Got it.
Correct.
Thank you. Go. Keep
Yes.
going.
So on that grassy lawn was contemplated a one-story building. We have adjusted it. As you can see, we've bumped the eastern side of the building back 5 feet. And I can show you why we've done that. But what you'll also see is that we've added a few parking spaces. Where the hand right now, where the cursor is, we've added 2 sets of tandem spaces, which would be dedicated to the residential, with the thought process of the residential, can cooperate with each other to back in and back out. But they would not be accessible by the commercial tenants. We would be abiding by a calculation for parking that was part of relief that we got for the Brookside Square project that equated to about 4 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet for the commercial and 1.5 parking spaces per unit for the residential. So in accordance with that, we needed to add 6 spaces here for to accommodate 4 units of residential. So that's 4 in the tandem space on the west side of the parcel, and then we've added 2 parking spaces that are parallel parking spaces to the Beharrell Street extension. Those spaces will most likely be for commercial users, and we'll make up the 2 parking spaces for the residential in the existing parking lot. If we can go to the next slide. This gives you a sense of just the footprint and how we're going to adjust it. So the footprint is 6,750 square feet. However, we do need the lobby area and the access point for the residential above. So out of that 6,750, we'll subtract about, a little over 300 square feet for the services for the residential, mail. We will allow or accommodate a space for an elevator. Building code, as I understand it, does not require an elevator for a building of this size. However, we do think that there's a possibility that our residents, end users may want or need an elevator. Just judging from some of the demographics in the back building, it may be required. So we will accommodate a space for it. So that brings the retail commercial square footage down to just above about 6,400 square feet. So reducing between 300 and 350 square feet of residential area, which also reduces, 1.5, something like that, about for the parking that was dedicated to the retail. So we're just trying to balance the parking. The parking is really one of the main challenges. And if we can go to the next one. This is a layout, and it's just, to fill out the package. We don't have to get too detailed with this, but this, shows the layout of the 4 units on the second floor. We would like to have some outdoor space for these units. We also feel that it would be a great spot on Commonwealth Ave with all the activity going on, people walking by, to have activity above the street level, and in some locations looking down on the street level, which you can see on the bottom portion is a fairly sizable balcony. And then we have a balcony on the eastern portion, and then we have two balconies right there, and then on the northwest corner in that location. Flip to the next one. So this is really where we've ended up thus far. And again, we're by no means done working with the West Concord Advisory Committee on the architectural concepts, but we feel like we've brought it quite a distance from where we started. And so this is the 2-story scheme. We've gone through 3 iterations, and it's been made clear that we want to bring in a number of influences from Commonwealth Ave, both the north side and the south side. So I'll take you very quickly through some of the changes that we've made, since I know some of the members of the West Concord Advisory Committee are here, and I can talk very briefly about some of the changes. We would like a masonry base course. I look at the building in layers. So we want a masonry base course right along the ground. The middle course, which is the storefront window system, is entirely different than Brookside Square. It was made clear to us during the process that it was not appropriate to have a mirror image or a cookie cutter building that looked like Brookside. And we understand that there's a different aesthetic and character to Commonwealth Ave. So we took the influence for the storefront system really from the Concord Outfitters building across the street to the south. They have, if you look at that building, it's a white storefront system, wide mullions, both on the storefront, and then above the windows and the doors, they have another smaller set of windows above that. There's an architectural term for that, but I don't know it. I will have that for the next planning board hearing. We have awnings that are an influence from Deborah's Gourmet and a number of the other buildings along this stretch on the north side of Commonwealth Ave that we do not have at Brookside Square in the rear. We are borrowing from the Deborah's Gourmet building for the sign band above the awnings. Again, a feature that is not shared with Brookside in the rear. And then we have, if you can see them, they're a little small in this picture, but we have gooseneck lighting that we actually borrowed from the design guidelines themselves as some architectural features. We have decorative lighting sconces along the storefront level as well. What we wanted to do on the front side of the building, and what you can't make out in this elevation, but I'll have more detail on this as we go through the process, is the white side of the building. Again, that's the east side and the right side. That bears really no relation to Brookside. We don't have a light facade like this. This is more similar to a number of the other storefronts and buildings on the north side of Commonwealth Ave, and we feel like that color will blend in nicely and have a nice effect. We do, in this location, have approximately 105 feet of frontage. So relative to the other buildings along Commonwealth Ave, it's a long building expanse. So we felt it was important not just to have one flat facade. So what we wanted to do was break up the building in a way, and you could see this when we were looking at the site plan. We bumped the, thank you, and maybe go back one. So on the right side, you see that we bumped that facade back 5 feet. And the effect when you're walking on Commonwealth Ave is that the facades look like two separate buildings that are, butted up against each other, much like, a number of buildings along Commonwealth Ave. What that does is, obviously adds variability to the street, some interest for pedestrians walking through, and it also opens up opportunities for seating areas. So this side of Commonwealth Ave right now, really the only destination for pedestrians is to get to Neshoba Brook Bakery. And though people walk on Commonwealth Ave and get back to Neshoba Brook Bakery that way, we do find that from the village, people are walking, nowadays through Brookside Square and using the back walking paths that are along the Neshoba Brook, which is great. It's what we intended. But we would like to activate the pedestrian activity at this western portion of Commonwealth Ave as well. So the eastern portion of this building, what you see as the red portion coming off of the right side, is important to us to create a visual effect to lead people down to this side of Brookside, both to seating areas in front of the storefronts, and we'll also have seating areas and landscaped areas with some retaining walls and brick walls on the eastern side, southeastern corner of the property. Once we get to the western portion, again, we felt it was important to have some variability and some variety in the facade. If we can just go back to the last facade, thank you. So on the western portion of the south elevation, we do have some influences that we would like to keep for Brookside Square. And on that kind of facade to the west, you'll see that there is a red, a very vibrant red that is very similar to the red that we have. It's really the red that we have back at Brookside Square. And personally, I love the red that we have on the portion of Brookside Square. The original plan was to have that red pop that would be similar to really the brick building that's next door and kind of evoke the brick industrial style that is on the back of Commonwealth Ave. And we've gotten fantastic feedback on that vibrant red. The back portion of the upper portion of the second story of the western portion of the south facade, it's a mouthful, I apologize, is where the building, the second story, is recessed back for the outdoor space for the residential on the second floor. And again, we see that level really above the red as being active, residents being out and being able to enjoy the outside and up on Commonwealth Ave. What you will see on that level is a board and batten system. It's a vertical effect for that facade. We do have that back on Brookside Square, and we think that it's a very interesting material, and it has a very interesting effect at different points of the day when the sunlight hits the building. It creates very cool shadows and different visuals for that facade. And then as we go around the eastern side of the building, go to the next. Yep. A couple more influences from Brookside, and we're focusing that more on the sides, and the back are the natural wood. It's more of the board and batten, and then we can switch around to the other next one. So really quick, one of the challenges to a building that's up on the front of the road is that you need all four sides to be aesthetically pleasing and interesting. So rather than having the back be just a blank, building that you see in many commercial buildings, this is a facade of equal interest, but we do have some more Brookside Square influences on this side, mostly with the natural wood, just because it is facing Brookside Square, so it's not as apparent on Commonwealth Ave, which has a different character. And then on the western side is, again, some more of the natural wood. We may switch this facade up a little bit to reduce the natural wood here. It was mentioned to us at one point during one of the presentations that this might be a very good location for signage coming into the village as kind of a welcome to West Concord Village location. I participated in a number of committees for kind of the signage and branding for the village, and there was a desire at various times to find a decent location for that. So that's really the presentation. This was just meant as an introduction. We are not looking for an endorsement, but we just wanted to hopefully get a sense that we are on the right path for a two-story mixed-use residential and commercial concept. And then if we are, we will participate with the West Concord Advisory Committee, and we'll launch our formal submission process with, revamped civil engineering drawings, and be back to you.
Should we go back up front? Yeah. I'm learning. Okay. So I guess you're looking just for some basic indication tonight of like, okay, this is progress versus like, oh, no, that wasn't really. But I mean, the thing is, this is the first time that this board has seen these projects. I've seen prior designs as just the liaison to the West Concord Advisory Committee. Others may not have had any idea what the prior process was. So I think, we ultimately, as you had stated, we need to defer to the West Concord Advisory Committee, which is a subcommittee of our committee, they administer the West Concord design guidelines. So many of the points that you brought up are really within their purview. And then we will not fully defer perhaps, but we will certainly take their advice as far as what, their views on this. So, but I think again, you're saying since there's going to need to be a revised special permit, it would be rough if you took this through them and then we said, yeah, no.
If we came back in a month or two from now and presented and the board were to say, we wish you hadn't done that work, then.
So I guess a question I'd have for the other board members is, do you have any first impressions here? And based upon that, I think that we could send it to the West Concord Advisory Committee.
Can I ask,
for Elizabeth or you to point me towards what are the where in the bylaw is the special permit that we'd be looking at? Like, sure, yeah, sorry. What are the criteria or standards that we'd be looking at when it does come back before us for the revised special permit?
We'd be doing a site plan review on this. Yeah. So.
Just curious, is this on? If you've thought yet about like aspects of energy efficiency and like what's thoughts about what will be on the roof, solar, green roofs, that sort of stuff.
Because that is now part of our criteria for site plan reviews.
It's part of.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is that Brookside in the rear was, there was a lot of attention paid to energy efficiency. It was LEED certifiable. We didn't end up going through with the certification, but we could have. It just is a very expensive certification, but it will be similar. We'll be using very comparable, similar appliances, things of that nature. We most likely will not have solar on the roof. We have run into a few issues in the planning for that on Brookside. We wanted to put solar on the roof of Brookside. There are a number of considerations as to why we haven't, at least yet. So,
What would be on the roof otherwise? Would it just be like HVAC, or would it be rooftop, like deck?
So personally, I'd love to see a roof deck on. Roof decks are very expensive because you need to, you need another elevator stop. We're going to be looking at that. We haven't, brought the concept to that point as of yet. But for a building like this, you have to bring the HVAC condensers, the rooftop units for both the commercial and the residential to the top, which the roof deck gets very crowded when you're taking care of all of those uses. So I don't even know if we'll have all that much space on the top.
Other comments from the board? Questions, comments?
Thanks for being on the agenda after a really long controversial project. I know I've been there before, and it's thanks for your patience. Thank you for providing these renderings. Are really nice to see, and it gives you a really just immediate idea of what it's going to look like. I know this is probably a detail that's far away, but thank you for including the bike racks.
Yes.
It's really glad to see those.
Yes.
And I've seen lately like some really great bike racks that like aren't the standard, that are like just interesting architecturally or design or tying to design in the neighborhood. Emerson Umbrella has these like amazing kind of works of art that are also bike racks. So I just ask you to just plant that seed in terms of considering something really fun and interesting for the bike racks.
We are.
That might be like one of the easy things.
With Brookside being next to the rail trail, we are huge proponents of
Thank
biking
you.
and bike racks.
And really glad to see those outside tables as well. That'll be great add to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
No words from Alan?
I'll say something. I really appreciate the presentation. And I think, I haven't seen the project before, but I think how you break the scale, I think that's very successful. One thing, and you mentioned this also, I think it's the east side where you're approaching it, where you said you're going to have the signage. So is that the east side, or as you're coming? Yeah.
Yep.
So I think this building is almost like a gate, because it's a very important building. That defines the whole character of the street, basically. So that I would, I think that facade could be developed a little more, maybe with this whatever signage is, or because right now it still looks like a side of a building. It's not almost that needs to feel like the front, because there's nothing is going to be built in front of that. So when you're approaching it, that corner is very important. So that would be my only architectural comment. That
Thank you.
because it still feels like a side. I think I could be wrong, but from that rendering it felt like that. But with minor changes, it could be that could be resolved, I think.
Thank you. we will work on that. Thank you.
Kristen, anything?
Oh, Nathan, did you have something first?
Oh, I just wanted to ask, I know you said there are 4 units. Is there, what's the size range on those?
So approximately, so they're all going to be 2-bed, 2 baths. And they're anywhere from 1,150 square feet to 1,250 square feet right now. We're still studying the units, making sure that they're laid out correctly and the bedrooms have enough, room. So we're still perfecting the units, but that's approximately where they will come in.
I thought it was great. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Question, and I don't know what the process for installing an EV charging station is. I don't know if that's up to the town or who does that, but is that a possibility for the residents?
So speaking just personally, I don't know the process for installing one of those stations outside. I know it can be done. We did install stations for electric vehicles in the basement garage of Brookside Square. So I know it can be done.
Right.
We're working very closely with the consultant on that, and we can explore that here as well. I think it's an appropriate. I mean, the world is going in that direction, so I think it could be very appropriate.
Okay, and then I'll just comment for myself. Just having seen prior designs, I think that this is a big step forward. It takes into account, again, most importantly, the addition of the second story and the residential use, and the size of the units that are being created, I think, fill a need in the town. The reading of the front of the building is a much better match for the streetscape along Commonwealth Avenue, at least in my mind. And the scale of the facade, I think, is appropriate. And then the provision of the tables. I think that, during the special permit renewal process or revision that we'll have to do, there, of course, will be a number of challenges. I think things like waste disposal, at a site that has 4 fronts can be very tricky, right?
I agree.
So, there's many hurdles to go through, and I, of course, will be very interested to see what the response of the West Concord Advisory Committee is, but I would just say that I expect that you'll get a more supportive read from them, and that based upon their input, we'll be taking our cues from them.
Thank you.
I think my only last comment or question is what I've thought about, because I live in West Concord and walk by there every day almost, and understanding now the connection between the back building and this front building is like what strikes me as I walk through there is this is the last piece of grass right in West Concord. And I'm perfectly and happily supportive of what it sounds like will happen, but have you thought at all about any sort of connection or green space opportunity, even branching the 2 buildings? Like, I sometimes do walk through the parking lot, and it's not a particularly enjoyable walk, but I'm trying to get from point A to point B, but some more green space would be nice in West Concord.
So one of the aspects of the project that I'm very excited about is that on the back part of the building, there is a fairly large triangular piece of open space. Part of the process that we're going to be going with is getting with our landscape architect to design that green space so that it is very special. We also have additional seating area possibilities on the westernmost side of the building. So I couldn't agree with you more. We have a significant amount of landscaping and open space on the back building, and that's, I think, the highlight of that project. Along the brook, in front of the building. So I couldn't agree more that in this stretch of Commonwealth Ave, it would be fantastic to have people come, opportunities to sit, even if you're not shopping at our commercial tenants, to be able to come and just hang out. So you see the triangular piece in green behind the building. It's really right along the back facade, Elizabeth. And then to the west of the building, there's a little triangular piece in front of the tandem spaces. That could be outdoor seating opportunities as well. And then one other thing that maybe wasn't visible enough in the elevation, and we will be sure to zoom in on that, is on the east side, the southeast corner of the building, there are going to be a number of retaining walls. That would be effectively planters and seating areas. Part of it is protection for the building, because we are in a interesting spot where a car could go right into the front side of the building, so we want to protect that corner, but that will also give opportunities for benches and planters.
Okay. So I think we are done with this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Let's move on to our next item.
Thank you.
Actually, while we're on the topic of West Concord, let's talk about the letter that we received from the West Concord Advisory Board. And actually, what I'd like to ask is if a member of the West Concord Advisory Board could speak to their letter now. Or I could just point out a few of the things that are in it, but go ahead. It would be nice if we got some representative to. I don't have a printed out copy.
I don't have my glasses on.
Read that. Peter DeRosa.
Yeah, it looks like that's not on.
No, I think they must have just turned it down. So Peter DeRosa, 34 Conant Street, member of the West Concord Advisory Committee. Okay, all right. We did spend some time talking about some of the zoning ideas. Let me see if I can go through this here. One of the plans that we looked at was the West Concord Junction Cultural District Committee had a plan commissioned, and they had a number of recommendations. So I don't know if everybody's got a chance to read that. I think it's been out for about a month, maybe a little more now. So they had a long list of recommendations in the back for enhancing the cultural district, and we tried to focus on some of the zoning related recommendations in there. Oh, thank you. So a lot of this focused on there are multiple zoning areas, and we were looking a lot at the industrial and its relation to artists and kind of how these two things interacted. So one of the recommendations here, recommendation 20, ensure that the Concord zoning bylaw enables artists and artisan studio spaces as an accessory use within a half mile of the district. So we were looking at definitions of craft shop in the business area and light manufacturing in the industrial area. And one of the things we've seen also referenced from other towns working on this is trying to ensure a little more explicitly that artist spaces are included in that. And we had some conversation back and forth about the difference between what happens if you zone these as, or try to include artists in the business area of the bylaw versus the industrial. I think those are various options. It turns out most of the business uses are allowed in the West Concord industrial. So trying to go over those zoning tables and look at where things are included. But I think looking at those definitions was one thing. Allowing artist spaces in all three of the West Concord zones. This was another discussion about the differentiation between the three different zones that are in West Concord. We had a lot of conversation about how it's nice to protect certain uses, but it's also hard to architect with such precision on these different areas, that they're all relatively close, packed right around the village. And we really wanted to try to create as much flexibility as possible for including these uses. So I think there was a general feeling there could be benefit to including it in the industrial uses, and we had some conversations about the definitions of maker spaces, places where people are actually making things. Today, the light industrial is really a lot of it's rather technology oriented, and it doesn't really allow for something that might be an artist definition. But there would be an opportunity to define it in there. Recommendation 21 was talking more about live workspaces. So that was an interesting topic, which we got to learn a little about real quickly. We hadn't really talked about that much before. While we do have mixed use buildings, as Patrick was just talking about now, for their new 13B plan, where you have residential units and you have commercial units. This is really an idea of, could somebody have a single unit that can actually have a mix of both? And that seems like it could potentially have some economic benefits, and that might allow somebody who couldn't otherwise afford to have two separate spaces to be able to use that space, which might address something that we talk about often, which is how do you have an economic model that will work with these spaces? It would be nice if we could offer up artist spaces, but we know the rents are pretty high there, and that's not likely to change, especially with any redevelopment that goes on. So looking at the sections 4.2, 4.2.4, looking at the mixed use and really trying to allow for the single unit rather than only separate unit, and to try to tighten that up. And we were just noting under there also the connections back to the long range plan, Envision Concord, creating more housing choices and like I was just talking about. And then the transportation as well, since live workspaces offer the ability to prevent people from commuting potentially in two different directions if you're building separate units, because again, a lot of the time it would be unlikely that a workspace, somebody can afford to both live and rent a separate workspace in that area. So that was a lot of the discussion around tying those plans to, we've talked about many other things as well, but trying to focus in on what might be more actionable right now. Permitting the use of grocery was another thing that we agreed we thought would be useful as something. It's the most frequently requested use that we get asked for. Expanding in the town. So a lot of this discussion is about whether allowing grocery, which is not allowed right now in the industrial part. It is allowed right on the street there in the business and the village zoning. So would that displace other uses in that industrial area? And that, of course, is the con of introducing it there. But given the limited opportunities for introducing grocery in any of the three districts, we generally felt that creating more flexibility would make it more likely, although not necessarily likely, but it would make it more likely. So we thought that would be good. And then we had a discussion, at least one discussion, about potential small hotel in that area, and that was generally something that people seemed in favor of as far as various uses there. This didn't come out of really public feedback so much, but it seemed like something that we thought might be useful and people might enjoy, so we could seek more feedback on that. So I think that's outlined. Oh, we got it back, sorry. And then we have heard some discussion of the multifamily housing. I know you are all working a lot on that. So we did have some collect some significant feedback on that in our open house, and it was all positive. We got no negative feedback on those, and the board is certainly supportive of, and I know there's a couple of different approaches being considered. I think we're generally supportive of what we've heard so far from the board around the village. And one of the things that's been noted often is that we definitely have a lot of duplex housing now. It is really in character with lots of streets within the village already.
Okay, thanks very much, Peter. So I think then, taking all those comments, there are 4 or 5 things that we could potentially work on. One was identified as we could define a new use. The new use being one of artist studios / makerspace, to really distinguish that use.
I think you're gonna have to separate.
Oh, here we go. There we go. I didn't have my mic on. You
Oh,
were
is that
just
one
hearing
on
the
there?
echo from
Yeah.
that one. Okay, so, sorry. So it would be create a new use that would be more clearly distinguishing the artist studio / makerspace from what is now, a craft shop could be a retail thing that doesn't really involve the making of anything. So I think,
So I'm not quite sure about, the definition currently in the zoning bylaw, craft shop is a shop or studio of an artist, potter, sculptor, silversmith, wood carver, or similar craftsman.
okay, but then if you look at where it is allowed,
It's allowed in all of 3 of the West Concord districts.
so it's both business and industrial, all,
It's allowed in the West Concord Village.
right.
It's allowed in the West Concord
So you're
business.
saying that you just don't feel it's worth trying to carve that out as a use?
It's already covered.
It's already permitted.
Sure, it is, but,
So but following on the conversation, I think the question needs to be, that I take back to the building commissioner, is that single use. It used to be you had your artist studio and then you went behind the beaded curtain and that's where, their living room was, and then there was the kitchen, then bathroom.
well, that would be artist live workspace.
Right, and.
That's another potential use.
Well, no, you can already have combined business residential in the.
Okay, so that was a question I think that the West Concord Advisory Committee have, and that I do as well, which is, does mixed residence / commercial, can that be within a single unit?
Yeah,
Or was
that's a
that
building
mixed
code.
use?
That's a building code question.
Okay.
So, currently you can have,
So we already allow that, is what you're saying?
so currently you can have a combined business residence in the West Concord Village, except no residential use shall be permitted on the first floor in the West Concord Village District. But you can have a combined business residence by right in the West Concord business, but not in the West Concord industrial. So you can currently have a combined business residence. The problem is looking at, you have to go back to section 4.2.3 and look at the criteria and make sure what you're trying to accomplish could be accommodated. The single building question, whether you can have your artist studio, walk through the beaded curtain, have your living room, that's a building code issue that I can't answer.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what we were trying to get an answer to, because,
Well, that's not a
as I
zoning
read this,
question.
it seems to be assuming that combined business residences, like what we just saw, business on the first floor as commercial units separate from residential units, not a unit that was combining both uses. I don't see that implied in 4.2.3.
But it doesn't say it has to be that way, just because that's the only thing you've ever been presented with. All it says is that each unit is structurally part of the commercial building. It doesn't say that they have to be separated. Granted, that's all you've ever seen,
Yeah.
but nobody's proposed anything different.
Okay, why don't we make as an action item getting that answer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did mention business residence is not allowed in West Concord.
Industrial.
Right. Right. And so then that's another potential thing that we could do. So then,
The next question, dealt with, amending the principal use table to allow grocery store in West Concord industrial.
Right.
Which, again, fairly simple bylaw amendment. You change the no to a yes. But then you have to go back and you have to look at section 4.5.19, which currently says that in the West Concord Village District,
The size limit.
you can't have a grocery store more than 10,000 gross floor area. So what has to be done is the discussion with, I'm going to say a smaller grocery store. No, we're not talking about, Stop and Shop, but is 10,000 gross square feet, is that realistic for a market to sustain itself with its inventory, its,
Well, I think just
retail, the
as a
storage.
comparison, we could look at Concord Market that just, opened a couple of years ago. Right.
Oh, yeah. So I'm not saying these aren't feasible, it's just, again, it's going back and looking at the unintended consequence
Yeah.
and just changing that.
Well, and
So-
it's also important to note that the West Concord Industrial District crosses over Neshoba Brook and goes, quite a ways back on the other side, along Commonwealth Avenue, or back behind there.
Correct.
So, what uses might end up back there, so. And then the last one, the hotel, I think that somebody noticed that hotel, of course, is allowed in industrial park, but it's currently a no in West Concord Industrial. So, one of the things that I had pointed out as a liaison in the West Concord Advisory Committee study was that usually we, have either some town document or study or something that's telling us, yes, we want to have a hotel here, but we don't really have much evidence of that yet, So that one, it's more of like an idea that someone had.
We did reference the long-range plans discussion towards.
Promoting tourism, okay, as a general thing, but with the idea that there are potential other sites, is it important to open up a new space? So anyway, those are the different initiatives that we could pursue.
I only heard two.
Okay, so craft shop, it sounds like our town planner is saying we don't need to work on.
Well, I'm saying I need to go back to the building commissioner about whether that.
And then combined business residence, we need to find out whether that is actually covered. But then we also potentially would need to include combined business residence in West Concord Industrial, right? So that would be.
Three things I heard us say we could amend.
Yeah, and then adding the grocery to the industrial.
Hotel
And then
combined business residence, all in West Concord Industrial, right?
those would be, I think that's what was proposed.
Just wanted to kind of
Yeah.
gather it.
And then, of course, it doesn't have to go from a no to a yes, it could go to a special permit. So,
One comment on the craft shop thing. I think we want to be careful not to miss the fact that we don't necessarily want to treat the retail craft shop the same as an artist maker versus the bylaw, because then we might get the business side of the retail side of it, which is not really what the trust was for. It's for the maker side of it, which might be part of the reason to try to make it more to the industrial side. Just be careful of the distinction between.
the retail use. Although, most artists do need to sell items out of their studio, but it's not necessarily as a retail operation. Yeah, it's accessory use, yeah.
So I can just tell you that you can easily develop a new, artist maker space definition. The problem, and say that you can have a retail component that's accessory. Accessory is anything less than 50%. So what has to be thought about is, okay, are we only talking about, 20% of the gross square footage can be, devoted to accessory, to retail sales of the products produced by the artist maker space, or, so that's something that has to be thought through a little bit more.
Okay, well, I guess I'm wondering if we should, first of all, is there a sense from the board of which of these you would like to pursue for this town meeting? I mean, it's...
Can the West Concord Advisory Board say which?
Well, they've actually made their
They lay 'em out,
recommendations,
but-
right?
but-
They've made their recommendations, and I think that then the question is, we would need to take them forward into warrant articles.
Nope.
Sorry, I just did. Everyone was speaking at once, so it was hard to kind of make out what was being said.
Sure.
The select board has to start preparing the warrant, so you do have some time to look through this before you would submit something.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to throw that out there.
I think the warrant closes, believe January 10th.
Right. So I think that maybe what we'll do is, can we get that building commissioners, basically the building code answer on combined residence business? And maybe we'll just have a more detailed discussion at our next meeting.
Well, and a prioritization of the.
You'd like to see a prioritization of these? I mean, would you say that the priority order is in the order that they were presented?
Okay.
Okay, there you go.
I'd like to hear if there are any reason not to do it. I mean, I think
I think that, for example, for grocery, there were a couple of reasons that were presented.
Not to do it?
Not to do.
So I can tell you some of the unintended consequences is the West Concord Industrial District continues on the other side of Neshoba Brook, as Matt said, you have to go down Winthrop Street. So, what would be the unintended consequence by changing the zoning bylaw to allow a grocery store or a hotel in the West Concord Industrial District, and then somebody coming in and putting a grocery store on one side of Winthrop Street and a hotel on the other side of Winthrop Street? There would definitely be impacts to Winthrop Street and that intersection. So that's just one unintended consequence if you were just to say yes and change the bylaw. You can change the grocery store limitation. 10,000 square feet is not very big. I mean, I'll pull the numbers for what Deborah's is and what the Concord Market is, and maybe that's fine for that type of market is sufficient. Then you have some limitation already in place in the zoning bylaw, and you're talking about just adding a couple words and changing the table.
Right, from a warrant article
Right,
perspective,
for a warrant
it's really
article
simple.
perspective.
From a presentation perspective, it's,
I think the avenue of a special permit for a hotel is a little bit better because you don't have those limitations currently in the zoning bylaw. So somebody could come in and say, yes, we want to do, a 30-room hotel, and that fits fine. Would somebody be able to come in and put in like the Marriott, which is I believe 118 rooms? That's definitely going to be challenging and would have different impacts. So a special permit process for a hotel, fairly simple warrant article from that perspective, but it would just be thinking about those unintended consequences.
the other thing is that, if you look at the West Concord master plan, the idea of having that industrial district there was to provide a place where people could work that was adjacent to the business district, that would create a village center that was functioning village center. And it is a concern that these other uses could dilute or displace the objectives of the the master plan. So I think that's what gives me the most pause when I think of restaurant and especially hotel. Even though I could imagine a really cool boutique hotel right next to the, depot. Wow.
Well, I can imagine a pedestrian bridge across the Assabet River and
Yes.
people stay at the Marriott.
Yeah, it's true. And there are other places to put hotels, so. All right, well, I don't know, maybe it's just worth.
So
even-
I'll pull stuff together. I mean, they are fairly simple warrant articles. I can pull them together and you can have a discussion about that. And
decide whether we want.
What typically happens is, once the warrant articles get drafted, there's a better discussion about the unintended consequences seems to start happening. So sometimes that's easier to visualize when you actually have
Sure.
the wording in front of you. So that's something I can do by the 12th.
Yeah. Okay. I think then we're ready to talk about an A&R.
Did you want to just finish your bylaw discussion, or?
I think we can take the rest of them next time.
Okay.
I mean, it looks like we're going to have a fairly open agenda next time.
Correct. The only thing I would ask is maybe if one planning board member would like to, there's really only two bylaw amendments that need help as far as two warrant articles that need help as far as the explanation. One is the accessory apartment, and then the other one is.
I have to say that I looked at the.
There's two current warrant articles that need additional wordsmithing on the explanation. And maybe if a planning board member or two would like to volunteer to work with me on expanding those explanations.
I have to say, I looked at the explanation under the two-family, and it looked like it would work just as well for the accessory dwelling unit bylaw. I mean, almost every word was pertinent.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, nobody's.
Oh.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, I'll work with Nathan on one and Kristen
All
on
right,
another.
excellent. Yeah, and then we'll take up the rest of the discussion at the next meeting. So this A&R, Lindsay Pond Road.
So I don't have a mic. If somebody can't hear me, please let me know. This is an approval not required plan. It's definitely one of the simplest ones you have.
Yeah.
It's currently 2 lots. Small. Yeah. There's a lot line that currently divides these 2 properties. This person owns both lots, and I want to remove that center lot line.
So I think we're ready for a motion. There's not much more to discuss.
It's in your agenda memo, which I don't know if you have that.
Okay.
I'd like to move to endorse the plan for Jason and Stacy Reed at 212 Lindsay Pond Road, dated September 10th, 2019, by Stampsky and McNary, Inc. As approval not required because the plan is not a subdivision because it does not show a division of land, and the lot shown on the plan has the required area and frontage as required by the zoning bylaw, and authorize the chair, clerk, or town planner to endorse the plan.
Any discussion? Or second, first of all?
Second.
Okay, second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Okay, and then we have 4 sets of minutes. And I provided to Nancy tiny comments on 3 of the sets of the minutes, which I can share.
Are the minutes on the website?
The minutes were sent out via email.
Thank you, okay.
So,
2 of them were sent.
just today, just this afternoon even, yeah.
You can postpone.
We could postpone those 2, and then The other ones, I just wanted, yeah, and those comments are pretty easy. So on the draft, August 20th minutes on page 4, there's a public comment from Mr. Edgars that they say thing instead of think. So just change thing to think. Then on page 5, I just added a comma to Mr. Harrington recap the public comments one by one, offering responses to some, not all. Comma before not all. Okay, and then on the October 1 minutes, for the A&R 209 and 249 Mutcherfield Road, first line show should be shows, and then on the third line, there's a space in the middle of the number 20,052. Really significant, crucial changes that must be made. I actually had a little more substantive comments, and I hope that Nancy, on the September 10th, and I hope, given the feedback I gave, that maybe Nancy will get back to me.
Sure.
It may require listening to the tape again a little bit.
Not a problem.
Okay. Then we're ready for committee liaison reports and staff updates.
So you're going to vote
Oh,
on at least
sorry.
2?
Okay, yes. So do I get a motion to approve the minutes as
Do
amended?
you mind giving me 1 minute to review that August meeting to see if my request for the breakdown of the open space is?
I think that was that from that same meeting? Yeah, I guess it was. Yeah.
August 1st.
No, that
No, I'm looking at it.
the December
August
1st
20th.
minutes.
August 20th. That was the meeting at Harvey Wheeler, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, August 20th. So you're saying, did you see that there? Smack and yes, the applicant make clear and provide the board how the proposed open 6 minute grant.
I think it was there toward the end.
Yes, it's there. Thank you. I'm good.
Okay. All right. Anyone want to make a motion?
I move to approve the August 20th and September 10th.
No,
October 1st.
October 1st.
I move that we approve the August 20th and October 1st minutes as amended.
Second. Okay. All in favor? Okay. All right. Now we're ready for our liaison reports and staff updates. Any liaison reports? Anybody been to some meetings anywhere?
I don't think so, but I have a question for Nathan.
Yes.
Are you by any chance going to the Sustainable Energy Committee meeting on this Thursday?
There was one on the 15th. Are they having one this? Oh, coming the 20th.
Maybe it's a different.
Is there?
I thought I saw minutes go out for, or an agenda go out for the Sustainable Energy Committee, and they were going to talk about the library, which I think we're done with the library, but I still think that's interesting.
Is that separate from the climate action?
They are two different.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're.
Yeah, I was like, that doesn't sound familiar to me. Maybe I missed something.
Then I might get the because they're interested in kind of sustainability criteria as well.
Okay. Did anyone go to the 2229 Main Street workshops?
What's that? Is that StarMet?
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't go.
It's out of town.
I had 2 presentations of
I
it.
know.
Yeah.
So none of us went.
Okay.
But
All right,
Gary,
and then-
Gary, can we, how do
Well,
we?
actually,
give
there's a
out-
question. Should we make a board letter to the 2229 Main Street Committee, basically with our ideas,
Yeah, let's do that.
given the presentation that we got?
I don't think you're in a position to provide any substantive recommendations just based on.
I'd say you had an opportunity last Thursday. At this point, the consultant is working on the feedback about.
Well, can we make comments as citizens?
Well,
Yes, but
Right, it was an initial solicitation of feedback, which is now gone to the consultant. They're gonna reprocess it and give it in a form that I think would be great for you guys.
yeah, you're not at the mic, but okay. All right, so what we'll do is people can make comments, but the consultant's consolidating feedback they got from the workshops.
Wait, hold on.
Okay.
Wait.
No, I just was repeating for the mic because we're being recorded.
I can tell you at the workshop, there were 50 people at the first session and 25 people at the second session.
Okay.
And the feedback I got from the DPLM director is that the EPA, was it EPA? Yeah. Was very happy with the incredible turnout at
Okay.
this stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Any other liaison reports? West Concord Advisory Committee, you saw the results of the West Concord Advisory Committee most recent meeting, so I think I've caught up. Okay. So
I have one update. So I did meet with the planners at MAPC to kick off the Thoreau Depot redevelopment project. And we did a little walkthrough around the Thoreau Depot, and they're gonna, start formulating how they want to move forward. What we did talk about was having a stakeholders meeting, so an actual invitation to all the property owners in the Thoreau Depot Business District, having that sometime around, I think we said the latter part of November, we looked at date of November 19th. So that's going to be going out, the invitation to the stakeholders, soon, because that gives, basically a month. And then talked about then holding a public forum, and they talked about whether to try and have that sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas or after the new year. Talking with Marcia, and then talking with a couple of the larger stakeholders in that business district. The consensus was after the first of the year.
well, what about our public forum around housing choice?
So I have reached out a couple of times, and nobody's, gotten back to me saying, yes. So I think I think the planning board needs to just pick a date and invite them, and
Okay.
and I've gotten no formal commitment that, yes, I've gotten no feedback from Public Works Commission.
Okay, well, do we have some, I guess the
And then you
minimum
had
is just to
spoken
see if
with-
there are dates that don't just outright conflict with other town events.
And then you had the discussion with the select board chairman about doing some type of joint public forum, and, I haven't been reached out regarding that either.
Okay,
So
I mean, should I just make a call to Kari Tari and try to get a date?
to call to who?
Or to the town clerk and try to get a date that is?
No, we can find a date. Where do
Okay,
you want it?
I
At
think
the-
that's what we're looking for, is it?
Have it at Harvey Wheeler, have it here,
Yeah.
have it at the school, where would you like?
I
Morning,
think Harvey Wheeler
afternoon,
is a good
right?
venue, or, seems good, but,
Okay.
yeah.
Although Harvey Wheeler always seems to have sound issues. Every time we've had a meeting
Compared to this room?
there. I don't know, I think it's worse there. Everybody's constantly yelling that they can't hear us when we're there.
Huh. Well, there are a lot of mics around here. Maybe
Yes.
that's part of the help.
Here it's almost, there's too much.
There's
There's too
echo.
many mics and too much sound.
I don't have a strong opinion, actually, so.
Okay.
But, I would hope we'd get about this size group. I don't think we'd fill Harvey Wheeler. I mean, that's a big group. Okay. I think then I'll open it to public comment, if there's any public comment.
Matt, can I just, Gary?
Not you.
Can we just go back to Star Met for a second? Were there minutes from the meeting?
Like closer.
Are there minutes or notes publicly available? And was it taped, and is it on cable access?
I don't think it, was it recorded? Do you know? I don't think it was.
Thank you.
So it may be available, the form, although we did break up into groups.
Fair
so
enough.
that portion was not, but the introductory sessions,
Yeah, like the
if they're recorded, would be available through public access.
Sorry, did EPA make a presentation, and is the presentation online?
I'll check that tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And if you can watch via public access, you'll get to hear some of the public comments and things like that. So sorry, Gary Kleiman, 57 Central Street, and chair of the StarMet Nuclear Metals Inc. Reuse Committee. But just public comment on this. It's only because we're close to Halloween that I'm still haunting you. I'll leave you alone soon. But since I was here and got to see the 13B presentation, I would encourage the planning board to have the developer cluster the mechanicals in the northwest corner of the roof, so that the rest of the roof, and make it solar ready, so that if residents wanted solar, it would still be an
Okay.
Sue Felshen, 19 Sunnyside Lane. Quick comment. If somebody is thinking they want to put a boutique hotel, say in the Minuteman Press building, I think it would be much more fruitful to rezone that into the business district than to allow them anywhere in industrial. Because like you said, Matt, I'd like to speak up for allowing industry in industrial districts and not having residents saying too noisy, too smelly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to adjourn. Thank you. Oh, is there? Go, come to the mic, name and address.
Come on down.
Yes, Jonathan Archer, 18 Oxbow Road. I heard something about accessory apartments, and then I heard two-family, and then we moved on from there. I came just to hear where we're at.
Oh, okay, yeah, and okay, and sorry that we didn't, get to go back to that, but what has been posted now on our page is the latest drafts of the warrant articles. So taking into account the feedback that we've gotten to date. So, and I did read through those, and they do seem to reflect the current state of play, if you will, for what we plan to take forward to town meeting at this time. Now, what we're trying to do is to schedule a public meeting to go over all of our housing proposals in November, ideally. And at that time, we would walk through each of them, kind of try to summarize the feedback that we've gotten, and then try to get more input from the public. So that's what we intend to do. If you have any comments right now, certainly since you've made the trip, feel free to do so.
Well, I don't know if I even wish to do so, but I don't know if I really wish to do so, but some years ago, the last addition to the house on the property was a 2x6 ceramic studio. And in theory, one could make an application, if one could, to turn it into a legitimate, rental,
Yeah.
with one car off-street in the carport, for, someone moving into the area, a corporate person, whatever, But I'm not even sure I want to do that.
Okay.
But I would like to at this time, just.
Well, that's what the accessory dwelling unit bylaw would provide for. And so that gives you all the criteria. Now, of course, it's not a bylaw yet, and there are special conditions under which you can do it today, but it doesn't apply to most people's houses. Okay.
This is a single-family house, not two.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So was there an exclusion to single family at this point?
Unless your house was built a long time ago, for the most part. Well, I mean, there's some other rules and regulations, but what we're trying to do with the accessory dwelling unit bylaw is to make it easier for homeowners to carve out such a unit, either in an accessory building or as part of their main structure. Yes.
It is an accessory building.
It can be an accessory building, or it can be integral to your main building. Okay? But town meeting 2020 is what we're trying to simplify that. Okay, and then, yeah, and then get more feedback in November in anticipation. Okay, now I think we are ready to adjourn. Thank you for your time tonight.